Welcome back, Rage Nation. Got myself Pete here.
That's not really exciting.
You got Senior Dixon.
I don't think that's appropriate.
And we got Monsieur Leopard.
Explorers deserved it. No.
Absolutely.
I was disgusted. I cannot believe they've done this.
Why is wacky? Why is that good? It's just nonsense.
I disagree on that. That's not possible.
We're getting the band back together. We're on a mission. Yeah.
Now we've got a whole new list of things to complain about.
Welcome back, Rage Nation. We are at it again. Got myself Pete here. And with us today, we got ourselves, of course, Monsignor Dixon. And if you heard some laughing in the background, it's probably because we got Maniacal Cackle on with us. How are you gentlemen doing?
Yeah,
I'm
doing
alright.
great. Excited to be here.
Cackle is the man, the myth, the legend, who's one of the champions.
Champions. Man, I tell you, Maniacal, you play some tight Vassal games. I saw a couple of your championship games. I'm just like, man, you're playing this tight to the chest and just grinding out those points.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really like about Rezzers and the toolkits that we'll be going over today, is that they just provide a lot of tools to play really precise, tight gameplay where it leaves your opponent with very little response sometimes.
Yeah, and it's really just kind of providing bad options for your opponent to be like, you can decide to come into this, or you can decide to try and go get that point, but there's a hard counter coming with some of these nasty Rezzer picks that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
And Dixon, you're having flashbacks over there. We were talking last episode about Maniacal just beating the crap out of you with Molly.
Yeah, I played him. I played him a couple of times in just for funsies. I think you were the one that played me with McMorning too, right? When I was playing Colette.
Yeah.
You were one of the players. You were the one that won. Because I have played against multiple different versions of McMorning 1 or 2. And I was completely confident. I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. And then Cackle, I think it was turn 2. I lost 4 pieces. And I was like, I concede. This is...
Well played, sir.
Holy crap, what happened? Except for, I did a good job holding off Archie, and that's it. That's literally only model that I held off.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to be an interesting episode because we are going to talk about the tech picks that you can do with Rezzers. This is going to be kind of similar to if you've been listening to Malifaux content for a while. Schemes and Stones used to have a tax episode that they did. And what they did is they kind of went through tech picks that you might take out of keyword. And they would do that for each faction. We're not going to do it like they did it, but it's a very similar idea of let's look at some good tech picks, when you would want to bring them, what they're good for doing. And then even some of those more corner case scenarios where it's like, okay, these are good in specific situations that you might want to consider them. So that's going to be kind of our episode that we're going to do today. And I didn't think anybody would be better at it than, Cackle, because you seem to be hanging around Rezzers for a very, very long time.
Yeah, since the start of... Before the start of the edition, because I was in the open playtest.
Nice. But before we get into that, make sure that you guys are checking us out. You can do that on our Discord channel. We always have people from all around the world talking at random parts of the day about Malifaux. You can find the invite. I've started putting that in our description notes, so you can check that out. Also, be sure to check us out on YouTube. We've been putting out video content reacting to different battle reports. I'm starting to put up how to unpack some crews. And obviously, it's not always optimal, but it gives, specifically if you're new to the keyword or to the game, it gives you an idea on how you might want to unpack your crew or some lines of play. And then, of course, if you want to support us directly, you can do that at patreon.com/RageQuitWire, where you can support us for as little as $1. And then if you want to buy stuff directly from Weird, we do have an affiliation link you can use to when you buy your stuff. And that is give us your money, please. Thank you weird.com/RageQuitWire. And it gives a little bit back to the podcast so we can get miniatures to test out and then give you guys more content. So anything is appreciated that you do to help us keep the lights on. So, getting into this this pick here, or these picks of keywords, or not keywords, but tech picks, versatiles, out of keyword. So, I know that some people love being in keyword, and there's a lot of synergy to that. But Cackle, when would you say you specifically reach for out of keyword or versatile models, and how many do you like bringing in a game on average?
For me, it just comes down to I bring whatever I feel is the strongest for the matchup and for the master, and that varies greatly. But I tend to play the masters that are really flexible, and say card draw masters tend to be really good at supporting any model, and so I'll usually find that if a master draws cards, they're more likely to support a wide stable of possible hires, whereas some masters, like say Tara, has extreme keyword synergy, so you're going to be leaning really hard into that.
Yeah, I found keywords that draw and filter cards. I found myself also being attracted to those types of keywords as well. I would say, obviously, we're talking about Rezzer, so I think Molly's kind of one that does that very well. I think Transmortis does that very well, but Transmortis has to be more in keyword, I think, to get a lot of it. So, I mean, are those the type of masters you're talking about where you just kind of filter your hand and kind of look at cards and...
Yeah, and Dr. McMorning as well with his ability to draw cards off of marker removal.
His reuse, recycle.
Yeah.
I was surprised how many cards he drew. I was honestly, because it's not just your markers. If you have somebody else, even your opponent, manipulating markers, you benefit from that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And worst case scenario, like one of your free stone models can do an interact to put down a ski marker and interact to remove a ski marker, and even that can be a card if you need.
Yeah, and it's just those types of masters are very interesting. That's why I've always been drawn to like Maw Tucket. Zip's always been interesting. Even Sandeep with Kendara, looking at cards, that's always pretty decent. But you're right. There are masters, I think, that flex more into keywords or out of keyword and versatile models. And even if you do like playing entirely in keyword, there are some matchups where you do need to go either out of keyword or you do need to pick a versatile to kind of fix those problems that you have in that matchup.
Yeah, and I think, for example, McMorning is really a good example of that. Most of the time, I'm really happy with his poison synergies. Most of the models I'm hiring are keyword models. But sometimes I'll look at a matchup and say, my keyword build loses, so I'm going to tech some really weird stuff so that my opponent is going to struggle to answer my list.
Personally, I'm a huge hater of Anna Lovelace because I've seen that more often than not. I hate... She comes into the table, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, my plan is completely gone off the rails.
Yeah, and I think that to kind of the point of looking at also these picks in Gaining Grounds 4, the perspective of this new packet, I think that there are some masters, and I was talking to Dixon and actually a local about this, they're liking playing Lady J like Death Touched, and I think that you could play Lady J Death Touched in this Gaining Grounds, but you would have to lean out of keyword and versatile to do some of the scheming and other stuff that you just can't do with her keyword because that's not what she likes to do. So you have to go out of keyword to do it.
Well, I mean, naturally, she has huge synergies with the Rocketeers.
Yeah.
So that's a plus. But that being said, they also happen to answer half of McMorning, which is he makes a whole bunch of bodies, and then you can just remove most of them, and he gets one or draws a card, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, he can either place it or draw a card. And I will say that when you go out of keyword or versatile, some keywords like different models better, and obviously that depends on which crew you're picking. And then there's just general models that you bring because generally they're good at whatever you're bringing them for. So if Cackle has a good enough time, Dixon, I'm going to invite him back on to talk about Molly and McMorning. So try not to piss him off while we're discussing this Rezzer stuff, okay?
I think he's going to get enjoyment out of me being upset. I don't get why is it that,
Be on your best behavior.
No, I refuse.
That's fine. So yeah, we kind of got this broken down into two, I guess you could call them tiers. We have kind of high priority and low priority. So since you kind of broke down this list, Cackle, why don't you tell us what you mean by high priority versus low priority tech picks?
So for me, the high priority stuff is like if I'm going into a tournament in another city, I'm thinking, what is the stuff that's really high likelihood that I'm going to be using it in games. Not, that 1 out of 60 matchup sort of thing, but what's the stuff I'm going to be using a lot. Then the low priority stuff is generally just as strong in the right circumstance, but those circumstances are a little bit rarer.
Okay.
Like,
So
I'm assuming, for example, because I saw in the list Anna Lovelace. So she's
Yeah.
high priority in tanks. So is it correct to assume it's because of the anti-place and in some cases the hostile work environment?
Yeah, and so with Anna Lovelace, I guess I'll just briefly talk about the tanks in general as well. So Anna Lovelace does a few things. Is first off, she's just an area control model. She'll stand in one place, and that area is so much control because hostile work environment is stopping your opponents from targeting their models, and that's going to stop things like rescue mechanics. It stops things like heals. So once a model is near Anna Lovelace, you can generally guarantee that it's going to die if you put enough resources into it. So she does a really good job of that. And so she just does some area control. That was really relevant in Gaining Grounds 3. One danger to be aware of with Anna Lovelace, and for those listening to this episode for counters, with Anna Lovelace, the way to enter is either you can run around her bubble, or you can use a displacement method like Winston has the dirigible ride. My opponent last time I played Anna Lovelace just was like, well, I'm going to keep throwing her backwards every time.
she can go on a balloon ride. Get rid of her.
Yeah, so to deal with Anna Lovelace, you don't kill her, you throw her into terrain, or you throw her out of the fight.
Yeah, and in this tanks category, you have the Valedictorian, Anna, and you have the Hanged. So these seem like models that they're just going to hang around in a spot. They're going to fight. They have some tech. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, the tanks in GG4, I think they probably have a better spot in maybe Cloak and Dagger and Raid the Vaults. Those are the two that I feel like these are probably where you're sitting and not being as mobile.
Yeah, and that's one of the things about these things is that, and say Raid the Vaults, where you just need one piece standing next to a marker on the back line, potentially, these models survive to the end of the game, usually. Yep. Valedictorian sometimes doesn't survive, but the reason for that is she does so much damage while she's up that your opponent just has to commit a million resources to taking her down. And that happened in one of my recent games where I brought Valedictorian and I was beating the opponent to death. And so he beat her down to 2 life, and then I used Sloth to heal her back up to 5, and then he kept beating her down, and she died eventually. But by the time she was dead, half his team was dead. So she's just really good at holding that aggro. And so
it's shocking why, because she's defense 5, willpower 6, so her stats are not great, but she has the dumb combination of armor 1 and harder wound.
And when you're attacking her, same as Anna Lovelace, she's drawing cards when the suits match, which is just real annoying.
Yep, Transmortis shenanigans.
So for me, the differences between these models is Valedictorian. I'm using if I want a bit of area control, like say on Wedge, where there's going to be a center brawl. But I want to control models by killing them. And Anna Lovelace, I'm bringing when it's that hostile work environment, and Gravity Well just does so much to shut down a crew. If they have a lot of friendly targeting and stuff, I'm bringing them. Hanged, I'm leaning towards them if I know that the opponent is really vulnerable to Terrifying 13, because I put a Grave Spirit's Touch on them. And so there's just some matchups where you're like, well, my opponent's willpowers are going to be 5s, and he doesn't have a lot of Ruthless, and those Hanged are going to survive to the end of the game.
They're not expecting Terrifying 13 models.
Especially out of keyword. If you're playing against Daw, you'll expect it, right? But all of a sudden, if you're just playing I'm playing McMorning, there might be some, but I'm probably okay. All of a sudden, they slam down a Hanged, and it's like, oh, crap.
Well, that being said, I don't know if this was you, but I do want to say this little thing about the Valedictorian. I saw her getting picked out of keyword against Zip, and I did not realize how good of a pick that was, because she cannot be up with gold, and her harder one made it so that even his gun was not that great. I was like, holy crap, this is insane great.
Yeah, and that really highlights. Yeah, that was me in the championship last year, I think.
Oh, okay.
That really highlights how valid you want to when you're doing tech picks. You want to leverage every bit of text on the card that you can. And so for Zip, one, I knew that he's super weak to flight models, and Valedictorian is one of the best flight models in the game that you can hire. And then also she's got a stun, so Zip, once you turn off his defensive trigger,
Yeah.
he just dies. And it's a stun on stat 7 versus willpower. It's one of the
Ooh.
most consistent stuns in the game. So that's
I think
another
Zip's
time.
willpower 5, if I remember right, too.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah.
This is
Bayou hates willpower. Like, if you go against Bayou, just slap some high willpower attacks and terrifying, and Bayou will struggle into that. It's tough.
Oh man, I'm telling you, that is some championship winning strats right there. When nobody expects the 11 point out of keyword flying death machine. It just works.
Yeah, and that's the thing is just I really like playing models, 10, 20 times to learn every bit of text on that card.
Yeah.
Because even say her puncture, if you're moving her around, that puncture trigger means that you can, even a hard to wound 5 health model, you can kill from quite a distance. And one thing I also want to say about these tanks is that their main weakness is how slow they are, and something you can do is you can combine them with the masters that move models around. So we're talking Yanlo 1, Molly 2, those sorts of masters, and enslaved spirits if you're doing an enslaved spirit build. And suddenly my valedictorian that was killing models 11 inches away is killing models that are 20 inches away, and that difference in threat range is just absurd. And I recently threw a valedictorian into an opponent's deployment zone turn 1 and just murdered half his crew.
Yeah, and I think that's something to you have to kind of keep in mind why you're bringing these picks out of keyword. And sometimes, like you were saying, in like a matchup against Zip, you're just like, you want to know what'd be really good against this is valedictorian. The only thing I would ask about this is, so in the Malifaux World Series, I think you guys do bans as well, don't you?
Some events, yes, not the championships, but some of the events are bans.
So do you find that bans is like, how do you feel about bans in general? I guess I would ask that you go a lot out of keyword sometimes.
As a format in general, I don't think it balances the game very well because the most powerful stuff in the game plays in keyword anyway, like Damien 1, for instance, is just really strong in keyword. But I think it's a fun and interesting format. I think that it does really cool things and it makes people think. And if you're trying to ban out Rezzers, as we'll see as we go over
Good luck.
there's so many options. So what you should instead think of is like, what do I just lose to if my opponent declares it? And you should declare that. If you're worried about losing to Anna, you declare Transmortis. If you're worried about Terrifying, you declare Tormented. And if you're worried about, say, Reliquary of Souls, you declare Monos' Ancestor keyword.
Yep, definitely. So anything else about tanks before we go on to one of my more favorite topics, which is mobility picks?
Yeah, one last thing I want to say about these tanks is related to the mobility, and that's both Hanged and Valedictorian can ignore terrain. And again, if you're comboing them with models that move them around, they can be surprisingly mobile, but not as mobile as our mobility picks. So yeah, let's move on to that.
Yeah, these mobility picks, these are some of my favorite models in the faction. So I'll go through them all, and then we can kind of just pick out the ones that kind of speak to us first, and we'll cover all of them. But we got, so Dead Rider, Archie, Manos, Bet Noir, and Yin, the creepy guts model. So out of those, I would say the one that kind of speaks to me a lot is Manos. But I know Edic in the Discord was saying he wants someone to look at him the way that you look at Archie. So, Cackle, why do you love Archie so much?
Yeah, I think basically for a year straight, I played Archie in every single Rezzers list I played, whether it was Vonstoke or Yanlo or McMorning or Molly. And it's just a fantastic model. And I'll group
even after nerf.
Yeah, even post nerf. I was upset by the nerf, and then eventually I was like, wait, no, he's still ridiculous.
Yeah, he's still like S tier. Like,
so I'll group Dead Rider, Archie, and Monos together, and then I'll explain why Archie is my favorite. So these three models are what define Rezzers to me. They are the best in class in the game, potentially. Maybe Neverborn can compete, but they are the mobile beaters of the game. So every single Dead Rider, Archie, and Monos are all min 3 beaters. All 3 of them can make 3 attacks in an activation without assistance, because the Dead Rider can use his Triple Crow trigger to do an extra attack. Archie's got Flurry, Monos has Sudden Strike. So all 3 of them are easily making 3 attacks in an activation, so they can just, when they get somewhere, they can just shred a model with 8 or 9 damage very consistently. And their mobility is all 3 of them can move 3 times in an activation, whether it's Ride With Me, Walk, Leap, all these things. They all just, anywhere on the board that you need to be, they can get there and start dishing out damage. So if you're playing against Rezzers, you cannot have a Scheme Runner with 6 health, because that 6 health Scheme Runner is just turning into a fine red mist instant. Like, we're talking on corner deployment turn 1, I have killed an enemy model in its deployment zone. Like, that's the level of mobility that these models are bringing and lethality. So they're a good counter to them, by the way, is Armor 2, for those of you, again, looking for counter to Rezzers. These 3 top models. And all of them have their unique gifts. So Rider, pulses out injured, and that Ride With Me really affects the mobility of your master, which can really matter. Monos has the Reliquary of Souls, and he has possibly the biggest deal with Monos, and the reason to pick him is over the other 2 is that Divine Strike trigger on his Spirit Barrage. That's
pretty good.
It's stat 5, so it's not like your main deal, but against enemy totems, you can always find a couple targets on the field that are just going to die to a couple Spirit Barrage attacks, and then for Monos, after he kills something that hasn't activated yet, you get activation control, and he gains fast, so you can then run away and leap, and he stays so ridiculously safe. So that's really, really good. And
I do want to. I just want to point out for the listeners, it's Lantern or Souls. He says Reliquary of Souls because when he dies, I believe he gives that to a model, right?
Yeah, he gives it away. You're completely right. I was meaning Lantern of Souls.
No, it's okay. But I just wanted for the listeners that are following, because that is a very important thing to also remember from him. He dies and it's like, oh, hey, look at that.
Well, I think the big thing about these 3 is not only are they mobile and they can hit and they can do all this stuff, they feel like, as compared to, say, a model like the First Mate, I feel like they don't chew up your resources nearly as much as like some of those other expensive models.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is all 3 of these models are so good at using mobility to stay safe. They're not even taking those hits in the first place.
Yeah.
But that tankiness factor kind of determines how long you can stay where it's dangerous. And that actually is why I like Archie the most, which I'll explain now. So what Monos has is he has a small health pool, but he has extended reach, so he can abuse positioning a little bit more. He can be like 4 inches away from a model, and you still can't charge him, which is really annoying. And he has Soul Stone, so like if a Monos player wants Monos to stay alive, it's so fucking hard to kill Monos because you're spending those stones, and like he'll survive on like 1 health, and then he regens up, and then he siphon lives you, and suddenly he's back to 5 life. And same thing with Dead Rider, is Dead Rider's got these tokens, and he's willpower 7, so on willpower, like, good luck hurting him. And on defense, he's got his defensive trigger, Forged in Death, which just means that he can convert his fate tokens that he gains every turn to defense. And then what Archie has is Terrifying 12, Hard to Wound, and a massive wound pool. And,
and he can't gain conditions.
Yeah, and he can't gain conditions, which
enormous.
Is massive. Yeah. And for me, the big difference here is with Dead Rider and Monos, they don't have to spend that many resources, but they do have to spend friendly resources staying alive. And often with, like, say, Dead Rider, you might be cheating defensively to abuse that defense 6. But then with Archie, because of that Terrifying 12, which is just such a massive TN for most models, like a Willpower 5 model needs a 7 to hit him. He drains the opponent's resources, and to me that's the really big difference, is when I'm running Archie, I know that really all I need to do is find that 4 of masks for the leap, and I'm generally running him with card draw crews, and then and a discard for Flurry, which are some shitty cards, and then other than that, he's not eating my resources, he's eating my opponent's resources if they want to fight him.
just because the cherry on top. If he has taken any damage, that discard for flurry also heals him.
Yeah, and the healing himself back up. And Monos also healing up is a huge advantage over the Dead Rider. The big disadvantage of the Dead Rider is that it doesn't self-heal. So every ping damage that they get on the Dead Rider, you're crying a little bit because
Well,
he's
I think also with those 3 models, you have so many attacks you're getting with those models that if you miss one of your attacks, you're like, okay, I'll just try it again. And you just, you have 2 or 3 cracks at it. And eventually with, they're all like, what, 3, 4, 5 or 3, 4, 6 damage pools. So every one of those big swings you get is going to hurt. And sometimes you hit them all and something dies. So it's good.
Yeah, and I cannot tell you how many times I've attacked with Archie, cheated into the tome trigger, and then on negs I flip the mod damage or even the severe damage, and my opponent's just like, you did 10 damage to my crew in that swing. Like, that sweeping strike trigger on Archie is the single best trigger on his card, I think. And then if we're talking some niche plays about Archie, that Numbskull, this model cannot gain conditions. That is the most powerful anti-condition tech in the game. To people listening in, you probably don't want to play Pandora into Rezzers anymore because that Numbskull is really, really rough.
Dixon, take it.
I mean, I can play Titania and it still hurts because I rely so much on like injuring people.
Yeah.
And just making them like completely useless so that everything in my crew can kill it. And Archie's just like, I just do whatever I want.
Yeah, that Numbskull and Terrifying 12 means you can't slow him, you have to deal with him, and to deal with him, the Terrifying 12 is like...
I think rough. It is important to say, though, that we did put these in the mobility category and not the tanks. If you throw those 3 models into just a scrum, they're going to eventually die because of things like ping damage, splash damage, just anything like that is eventually going to chip them down. So you can't just throw them in the middle of it.
Absolutely. If you leave these models in the middle of a fight, they're going to die. Their primary survival tech is the leap, the ride with me, the mobility, so that they're picking their fights. When it's Archie versus Silarid, he wins the fight. And then it's very hard for an opponent to cross the table and then get past 11 wounds. But if you're depositing him in the center of the enemy crew, most crews can figure out how to do 11 wounds to a model.
Yep. Slowly but surely, or just all in one hit. If he activates first, it's kind of like he's in a danger zone. That being said, though,
hit and run with these models.
Yeah, that being said, he still does his job even when he dies sometimes because it takes so much to kill Archie that your opponent is usually going to have no hand after that.
Yeah, and again, when you're taking Archie or Monos or Dead Rider, what you're looking for is all your opponent's cheat models are dead, so they can no longer score, and that's the kind of the victory point control element that they're bringing in. Is that it's just so hard to score when all your models that cost like 7 or less are dead. Really fast.
I did laugh though because I was playing. I had Archie, and it was going into an Anya crew. And I kind of leapt him into a bunch of kind of like schemers / like a surveyor and some other things were there. And I was kind of engaging them and I was like, this is kind of a bad spot for Archie. But I feel like sometimes the psychological just people being afraid of a model kicks in. And I think my opponent kind of freaked out a little bit that Archie was in the middle of things. And I was kind of like, this is actually a bad position, but I think he's freaking him out where he's not targeting him.
Yep. Also, I want to point out, since we're talking about this, because I just clarifying that I feel that the beater schemer, that type of model, is huge in the GG4. And the 3 models that you describe are basically beater schemers. They're all high mobility, high damage, can scheme.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that all 3 of these models can like interact, which is huge this season. So I'll usually spend them early game. They kill a few of the enemy point scorers, and they themselves are amazing at scoring points. They can get anywhere on the board. They can all interact twice. And it's very, very powerful. And then they have a lot of random text that you want to be leveraging. Even like Archie Hurl Corpse, if you combo that with a Riva crew, suddenly you have corpse candles exploding in the middle of that as well. So,
oh my god. I just realized.
Yeah. Virtually every line of text on these cards you're going to be finding these uses for. Archie the Bold Overtrigger, that's not enemy only. So there have been times where I've decided to move my own models. And speaking of moving my own models, something I really want to highlight for Dead Rider is the Reap trigger is not enemy only. On turn 5, you get 5 tokens, which is an extra 10 inches movement. And I have won games because my opponent was like, oh, your model is like 20 inches out of position to score, it can't score. And I just charged it with Dead Rider and reaped them both into position 10 inches suddenly. Or, if I have tokens from previous turns, I've done like 20-inch reaps before. And that's just like, then my opponent is like dumbfounded because they didn't realize I could attack my own model. So you really want to be leveraging all that text. And my final note,
I did laugh before your final note, though. You shared that in the Discord, and Jim was like, please don't tell him that.
This is so hilarious. Because, he got, again, all these models got nerfed. Because I believe even Manos got nerfed. And they're
indirectly because of his reliquary.
Correct. And they're still an S tier. Well, the Death Rider, I think it went down to an A tier, but that's still really good. That's among the best things. But Archie and Manos are still S tier because of not only things like this, but because of everything else we talked about, and then you add this.
Yeah, and actually, talking of the Dead Rider, one thing that I think often makes him S tier, especially in, say, Cursed Objects or those types of battles where there's a lot of positioning and maneuvering, Reap is just one of the, if not the most powerful repositioning tool in the game. The fact that when you're fencing with your opponent and you're jostling for position and everything, the fact that your Dead Rider can just be like, I'm going to dive into the middle of the enemy crew and pull somebody back, and then all of a sudden their model that is not good at surviving is in the middle of your crew and you just beat it to death. That Reap, all 3 of these models are about positioning control, but the Reap is like the cream of the crop when it comes to positioning control.
Oh, yeah. And it got nerfed. I want to remind again.
Yeah, it used to be a place. It is pretty gross.
It used to be a place. It is now nerfed. And listen to this man talk about the disgusting thing.
It's so gross. They should have nerfed it a little bit harder, I think. Because everyone was talking about Soulfire and all the damage it did, and I'm like, yeah, but positioning often wins games, and Reap is one of the best positioning tools in the game. But so my final note about these 3 models is we're comparing, do you take Archie, Manos, or Rider? In GG4, there's going to be a lot of times where I take all 3, or at least 2 of them. And that will, when doing 2 of them again, it will come down to the specific text. But the Archie, Manos, Dead Rider build, it's 30 to 31 stones, so that's like your core, and then everything else is support or schemers. But those 3 models together can murder all the enemy schemers and then scheme by themselves, which is just really, really powerful. So I recommend to people.
I brought those 3 with, and I'm actually going to talk with Jim, and I are going to do a reaction video on YouTube about this. But we played a game with Molly versus Tiri, and I brought all 3 of those, and yeah, Jim brought that scheme where you got to be within 6 of the center and engaging a henchman or master. And I kept using the Dead Rider just because, he's an enforcer. So I just kept taking the Dead Rider to move the model that he kept trying to position to score it just away from henchmen. And it was really good. I enjoyed it quite a bit.
That is hilarious. Okay, so
we do have 2 other models in this category, though.
Yeah, I was literally going to ask him that. I was like, when do you take the other 2 then? Because I really like Betty, but,
Yeah, so Bête Noire, I think that's specifically like a Riva and McMorning thing, because the thing with Bête Noire is that she's even more survivable than the others, because I think she's something like defense 6, and with her defensive trigger, she's effectively immortal against very niche things.
Yes.
That Rise Again lets her get around the battlefield, and this is a trick a lot of people may not know, and it's a rules is written thing, so maybe your meta may not accept this ruling. But the way, for instance, the Malifaux World Series ruling does Rise Again says this action can be taken while buried, target a corpse marker ignoring range and line of sight. That's a requirement where it can be taken while buried, but it's not must be taken while buried.
Yeah.
So you can still use it on the table. The unbury part of the effect fails, but then you still get the free charge action. So that's part of why a lot of people use her.
Yeah, that's the way my meta plays it. It gets you a free charge out of just, just her bonus, which is always great. So, and that's the way I interpret it. And if there's, the caveat there is there has to be, a corpse marker. So you don't have to be unburied. That's not part of the italics.
Yeah. I mean, my two favorite things about her is like when you can obey her, she can also bury herself. And then if you can like drop a corpse or something, or if you want to just throw a corpse candle at somebody, in your case, you monster, she can unbury on that too. But everything else that you said, like moving 18 inches, it's not bad.
Yeah, and so that's the thing is the berry mechanic's really interesting. The stat 6 plus is really interesting. So relative to like Monos, Dead Rider, and Archie, she can move 3 times or she can attack 3 times. Like if you're sensing a Rezzer theme here, that's really big. But she's min 2. She does have a crit strike. She'll sometimes slip. But her stat 6 plus is just insanely good. And when you're looking to use a stat 6 plus is when you're effectively when you're not using card draw. Because with Archie, I'm often cheating to hit anyway, so I don't care if he's got a plus on the flip.
Would you consider bet if you were playing somebody who had like a lot of manipulative or serene continence or things like that?
Oh yeah, absolutely that as well. If you're looking at crews with lots of minus flips, Archie is absolutely terrible against those.
Yeah.
Note to people again looking for that counterattack.
Dixon played that stupid brilliance crap where it's like, oh, if you have brilliance, that's not in a condition, so you're just at a negative. I was like, well, Archie is just running schemes then, I guess.
Yeah. And this is the sad part about that game. I was winning the attrition, but I was losing so hard on everything else.
Yeah.
Because he was way faster than me. I picked a crew that likes to stand and fight, and he did not. He was like everywhere.
There were Krooligans everywhere.
Yeah, there were literally Krooligans like 20 inches apart from every other model. It was stupid.
Yeah, so that's that stat. The attack's a bit weaker, but that stat 6 plus has some serious applications. The honeypot matchup. That teleport that she can do, because while you can do Rise Again while you're on the table, doing it from off the table, and as Dixon said, you can bury yourself on a mask, which is very easy to find on that stat 6 plus. You are often attacking friendlies for that on turn 1, and the distance you can get on her exceeds any of the other models we talked about. Like by herself, she'll just do the 40-inch move in one turn. So that mobility can be a big thing. I also want to call attention to a few other really important techs on her. Trail of Gore, insane this season.
Yep.
It's a little bit weaker on her because it means you're giving up your powerful Rise Again action, so she actually needs to be on the table to take it. But Trail of Gore, just insanely powerful this season. Scarlet Temptation, very, very powerful in some circumstances. So if you're a crew, for instance, Riva 1 has a move called the Unquiet Dead, which just makes everyone pop willpower duels or take a bunch of damage, and I think maybe even injured. And if there's Bet Noir is standing near them, it just absolutely will shred enemy crews. The only thing to be aware of is that because her defensive tech is based on burying, that aura is not very reliable. She's not necessarily going to be on the table, because I think savvy opponents that see the Scarlet Temptation coming will force her to bury. But even then, that's an action tax on them. It's really, really solid.
And she's also terrifying.
And again, she's terrifying. With defense 6, willpower 5, that is a very solid baseline of defenses, even before you get the fade away, reducing damage by 2, which is built in on both defense and willpower. And I think that is really what pushes her over the line into very competitive model, is that trigger is built in on both defense and willpower.
And then we, last but not least, we do have Yin.
Yin is, I really like her, although, again, I've started to just use these other models more often than Yin. But I think she'll probably make a comeback this season. Again, that Terrifying 12 Hard to Wound, she's got a nice package for eating the enemy resources to kill her. She's got 2 main things that I think just really make her incredibly useful, which first off is her melee attack has a built-in "you're coming with me."
Yeah, boy.
So that's that is a thing that is a little bit of a defensive tech, because she can get not only can she move herself a little bit each time she attacks and position safely, but she can abuse line of sight, because she can use enemy models to to block line of sight sometimes, which can be really powerful. And she's got a delay trigger as well, which I want to mention because it's super strong. It's also insane with, like, say, Seamus, Why Hello Love. Like, you use Yin to drag someone into Seamus, and then they take an attack.
So gross.
And then she's got that move 6 and the Dark Bargain. So that Dark Bargain is very, very flexible. It's far stronger than the normal walk, move, interact, because she can do it on herself, but also she can do it on other models. So, like, she can charge someone, move them somewhere like 6 inches, and then Dark Bargain a friendly somewhere else. And it's just that little bit, again, of like that positioning and maneuvering advantages where she has some really fine control over the battlefield, ends up being really good. And for Dark Bargain, the combos I'm looking for is I want to use that on models that self-heal. She pairs well with, say, Archie because he self-heals, with Monos because he self-heals. Sometimes some of your GST models, like, say, Hanged, are going to pair well with Yin because that ping damage adds up.
Looking at Yan Lo, because, I've been playing a lot of him. I've been putting the reliquary, Manos' reliquary, like on a Gokudo, and running that Gokudo with Yin. So now you can have the Gokudo do the interact, but then it has the regen now to heal itself. So that's been a good little package I've had as well.
Yeah, it's amazing there. And well, that is a keyword play, but also note that movement tricks really add up. The more like 3-inch moves you have, the more powerful it is. And so also keep an eye for, like, I think Seamus is a really good example of, Yan Lo's crew is nothing but movement tricks. Seamus as well. So many movement tricks in the crew, and they really add up. So I think Seamus is one of the best places to take that Yin. And another, terrifying adds up as well. The more terrifying you have, the more your opponent is facing bad choices of, like, well, I only brought 2 ruthless models, and the rest of my models, like, everything is terrifying. How am I going to bypass it?
And it doesn't seem like a lot, but man, terrifying really does put hand pressure on, because you're going to flip a 1 or a 2 or something eventually on those, and that just takes a card out of your hand.
Yeah, and like if that happens like even 3 times, like that's half of your base hand right there.
Yeah,
it's very, very strong. And so that's kind of a summary, I think, of the mobility must-pack models. Yin, I think, is on the borderline. I think Head Rider, Archie, Monos, everyone of every flavor should pack. Bet War, you're packing if you've got corpse crews like Seamus, McMorning, Riva, really, really good with Bet War.
Yep.
And Yin is a little bit more borderline, but those movement tricks are what she provides that the others don't. And at a cost of 9 stones as well. Sometimes you just want to save.
Yeah, and I think that's where we get into some of this support and scheming kind of tech picks. These are ones that I think are your lower point, like, stone cost. So I think these ones, it might be easier to squeeze in a list as your tech picks. So the list that we have for this one is you have Gwill, Sloth, Nurses, Gwison, and Enslaved Spirits. And I will just say off of this list, Enslaved Spirits are pretty freaking good. Those models are insane for 3 points.
Why are they 3 points versatile? It makes absolutely no sense to me. And they die and still get to keep their points because they drop a ski marker. Fuck those models.
They're like piglets, except good.
Yeah, they're both quite insane. So let's start with Gwison and Enslaved Spirits. This Rami package that makes us really upset that we have to buy the stupid TOS starter, get a bunch of stupid guild models.
I will say I was able to get the Enslaved Spirits on Gadzooks, but the Gwison are out right now of stock.
Yeah,
so
that's how I got them as well. Because the Spirits, I think, come 9 to a box. You're going to have no trouble finding your Spirits. The Gwison, I think, come 3 to a box, but I still split. I think for 2 boxes, you can ensure that 3 different players get 2 Gwison each and those sorts of things. So often you'll be able to pick up some of your Gwison. And they're both going to be incredible in Gaining Grounds 4. So let's go over
let's get into it.
Why must you hurt me like this?
Because we love you. So the Gwison, when they first released... Excuse me. So the Gwison, when they first released, everyone was making a fuss about Take the Hit and Vengeance, which has been FAQ'd out of the game, so it doesn't matter anyway. But for me, the Take the Hit isn't the core part of what they'll be doing this season. For me, it's two things. Is first off, they're incorporeal, so that provides a lot of mobility. They can just ignore terrain, that move 5, like that's a nice solid baseline, and it provides that little bit of tankiness, like 7 wounds in corp. This model is dying if your opponent decides it's dying, which should be the case for a 6-stone model, but it's going to take some investment. And because of the Vengeance 2, they're usually taking... Last time someone killed one of my Gwisen, they took 4 damage as a result, and it was like they did 7 to me and they took 4, which is just, really brutal. So that's a nice baseline package for a model getting around the board.
Yep.
And since we're on front of card, I will briefly talk about Take the Hit. You still want to consider Take the Hit because these models might be next to, like, say, a Kruligan. Last game, I actually had it next to my Master because there happened to be a point where the Master was, and the Master got beaten to death, and I had just forgotten that Take the Hit exists, so I could have saved my Master's life. So again, remember the card text on the card that you can leverage it.
Yeah, I would mention, though, if you do take the hit, Vengeance then doesn't trigger, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So it's just more of see Vengeance is a nice upside that comes up. And another thing is Vengeance does not happen if they get the killing blow on you because their models off.
Because you dead.
Yeah.
So,
which is shocking because I think Black Blood does. Or am I wrong there?
No, Black Blood doesn't.
Okay.
No, Black Blood does, I think, because Black Blood is step 5 of the damage timing, so it happens before
that's
the
good to know.
models.
Okay, so yeah, I remember it was like one of those rules was different than Vengeance, and I was like, what? Why?
Yeah, it'd be nice if it was all streamlined and use the same text.
I know.
So that's front of card. And, defense 5, willpower 5 with Incorp. That's fine. Your model's not immortal, but it's taken enough hits for a 6-stone model. Move 5 Incorp, very solid. But let's talk back of card, because this is what you're playing the model for. I'll just jump straight to the highlight. Is that Trail of Gore insane? It's one of the best ski marker removal abilities in the game. Remove target enemy ski marker with no flip is already decent, but then as a result you get a melee attack or the walk action. The melee attack can declare triggers if need be, and it can be mobility if you just want to walk around. That is insane. There are 7 models in the game with Trail of Gore, and I would argue that 2 of them are Rezzers. It's Bet Noir and Gwisen, and I would argue that Gwisen is the most efficient model because it's only cost 6. There's only one model that's cheaper, and that's Red Caps, and they're not very good compared to a Gwisen. So the Gwisen hits that sweet spot of being cheap but effective, and I think we're going to see a lot of Gwisen this season. I think as well, because they're very doable to kill them, I've been finding that running 2 of them is a really good sweet spot where dealing with 2 Gwisen, it's only 12 stones, and dealing with them is really, really difficult.
Okay. So I just want to point out that I've said before that every now and then a model hits like that tier or that point in like a stat where it's like almost backbreaking. Incorporeal models with 7 health hit that
That's pretty rough.
threshold, and these models have 7 health in incorporeal at normal stats. Like
and it costs 6. Often incorporeal models have 1 less wound than cost, but this for some reason has 1 more wound than cost. It's just insanely well statted.
Yeah, he's just defense, willpower, and movement 5. Like that's just average. Like this model is an average model that also.
And not only
happens to
that,
have
this
better
model
stats.
spikes really hard. It goes, for some reason, it spikes at 5 damage. It's 2-3-5 instead of like 2-3-4.
Yeah,
And
that's what I
has
want to
puncture.
cover next is the attack.
Yeah.
Because if Trail of Gore can give you a free melee attack, let's look at what that means. First off, Tear Apart, 2-3-5 damage track. That is something you see on 8-cost models, right? Like a lot of the release models, it's not quite good enough for an 8-cost model, but 2-3-5, very respectable. And then to have it on the Gwisen at cost 6 is, that's a solid baseline. Stat 5,
Yes.
nothing to write home about, but again, you don't care if your Gwisen misses. Like, that's just, you're just getting a few
That's
extra
gravy.
attacks.
Yeah,
It's gravy.
my 6-point model that is hard to take down. Oh, I missed. I don't care.
Yeah, and often what you're attacking with it, like last game I was attacking like Maurice and like a couple support models, and like you're just like, your opponent's not cheating to stop you either, so you're just flipping cards. Yeah. And sometimes you will cheat though, because these triggers are insane. Feast of Vengeance is just, a decent one where after killing a friendly leader heals 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
That does come up sometimes, but that's not the highlight. The highlights are Puncture and Tear Off a Bite. Anytime you see the Puncture trigger, you want to check that damage track for a spike. And Tear Apart has that 5 damage spike. And it's just so many times that you'll start flipping in a model and you'll be like, oh, sorry, I hit the puncture trigger, straight flip. Oh, whoops, I severed you. Take 5.
Whoops, you're dead.
That's just insane for like a random attack. And again, you're not building around this. You're not planning your whole turn around this going off usually.
He just hits those 2 thresholds that make no sense. Top end of 5 on damage, 7 health for an incorporeal model.
Yeah.
Why are you?
It's
why
just a bit too efficient for cost. All these things are adding up, and then you throw in Trail of Gore, which is insane. And then the Tear Off a Bite trigger is the last thing I want to cover because it is so fucking annoying when you beat a Gwissem down to 2 health and it tears off a bite once. Or I've even had it once. I had it happen twice in a row where it just healed 4 health, and then all of a sudden you got to beat it down again. You got to be taking your vengeance damage. So really be looking for those Tear Off a Bite triggers on your Gwissem. If your opponent doesn't cheat and you're like, oh, I have this 8 of revs that is now turned into a heal on my model, like, those types of things, that Tear Off a Bite trigger is one of the most important
Cackle, there's got to be a world where I bring this in like Molly, and you're taking 2 points of damage when you hit the Gwissem because of, Vengeance 2. And then you declare the same attack and Molly sees you, so you're taking 2 damage for Molly.
Oh.
And then you get more vengeance damage, and it's like, oh yeah, you just took casually, 6 damage trying to kill this thing.
Meanwhile, you did weak damage for 1 damage on this thing, and it just makes you lose your fucking mind.
Yeah. And that's real good. For those wondering at home how to counter this, big focused hits. You want to do a big focused hit for like 5 damage and then a big focused hit for 4 damage and it's dead. Which, it takes a lot of resources to do that. That's, again, why this model is so strong. Because the answer to it, like, it has a weakness, but even with that weakness, it's a fuck ton of resources to pull off. And with Molly, I really want to try this because Molly is a good anti-scheme master. And I'm thinking if you have 2 Gwissem, 2 Kruligans, that's just going to be... How is your opponent ever going to score against that? That's so stupid. It might be overkill. I'm not sure if you need all that. Maybe you swap a Gwissem out for 2 spirits.
Not to mention lost knowledge on Molly.
So a quick thing, because you definitely need to come back to talk about Molly, because she is like one of the lowest rated masters in the game for some ungodly reason. But every single time I play against you specifically, and it's Molly, I just, I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do? I can't activate this model. This model's just gonna die.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to the Molly one because I think in Gaining Grounds 3 there was an argument that she had a lot of weaknesses and was, maybe B tier. And Gaining Grounds 4, Molly is going to be showing up all over the place already in the World Series. Like she just had a tie in one matchup with one list, and then she's just like absolutely smashed another player. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of her over the next year.
Yep.
So
I hope so.
We also have the Enslaved Spirits, which they don't seem like a lot because they're 3 cost. They are only move 4, and they're in Corp with 3 hit points. But I think the big reason people use them are because 1, you have Chain Gang, so they kind of just move your pieces around and they go scheme, and if they die, they drop scheme markers. And I think that's the general use of them. But is there anything else, or you want to expand on just how you've kind of seen them on the table?
Yeah, I think the big thing is that they've got the Chain Gang. Early game, they're moving your models up the board. Mid game, like they can rescue models from engagement and stuff. A huge thing is there is no target number on Chain Gang. It doesn't take resources to use this model. And when you're looking at cheap, efficient models, you're looking for things that are not going to be consuming your resources. You want to pour your resources into your Archies, your Monos, those types of things. And this model is just like, and Chain Gang, that's 6 inches of movement potentially. The demise, it drops a scheme marker after it dies, so often it does its job even if it dies, which is insane. Chained, enemy models within 3 cannot reduce the value of their own focus condition. this, I think, is what really drives the spirit over the line, because the answer to in-court models, as I mentioned with the Gwison, is you take a big focused hit. A big focused hit for 4 damage kills an enslaved spirit. But in Melee, you can't fucking do that. You can't one-shot this thing consistently. Nope. It's so annoying. It's just a utter travesty. And there's not that many willpower attacks that will smash out a model. So it's just so annoying to kill for cost. And then when you kill it for cost, it drops a ski marker, not even in base contact, but within
3.
The best way that I've dealt with these pieces of crap is obey them. Because if you obey them and you attack either one of my own models or one of the enemy's models, they just die.
Yeah.
Man, I played these enslaved spirits with Molly in I played it in Cloak and Dagger. Yeah. And these things, man, they were just so good at just getting to the little, strat marker, picking it. They were good at getting up to enemy models and stealing it from the enemy model. They're really frustrating models to play against, I feel.
Yeah. No, and again, I cannot stress this enough. If you obey these models, you can do their triggers. And one of their triggers is to kill themselves. So if you attack somebody in melee and you hit, you kill this model.
And it's built in.
Yes. So do not not try. Just kill this thing. Just stupid kill this thing at range if you can.
Yeah, and they're real weak to ranged attacks, like Alone Marshal's tearing these things up turn 1. So you don't want to tech these in versus ranged attacks. And the other huge weakness that's really not obvious because it's not on the card is just when you're hiring a bunch of cheap models. It has some severe activation control costs. Because first off, you're possibly generating pass tokens for the enemy, and savvy players sometimes will save those for the next turn, and they just get to win initiative, and there's nothing you can do about it. They just automatically win initiative with enough pass.
And then they just blow up a model.
Yeah, and then that sucks. And then the second thing is, they are annoying to kill for 3 stones, but they are still killable. And when they die, they give up activation control for that turn, which is a big deal. So that's what you're looking to abuse when you fight these things. And I just briefly want to touch on their attacks. Arcane Touch, not very good, but you're often using this against enemies just because you want to charge and engage and be like, haha, you're engaged by a model that's going to take you 2 hits to kill, and then it drops a ski marker. Fuck you. It's so dumb. Lethal Curse, Injured is super powerful, so whenever you have a spare AP, consider it. But again, these models interact. That's the bread and butter for this type of model. Yeah. Pretty simple model, really, but it's just like the Gwison. It's just very, very efficient.
Yep.
Yeah, another model that I'm pretty excited that you had kind of in your take a bunch is the nurse model. So I've come around to the McMorning train. So when would you consider a nurse out of keyword?
Seamus 1 is the single biggest one, because let's go over the nurse's card. Sorry, I'm just pulling it up now.
Oh, you're good.
So the 2 most impactful things on the card, in my view, are the tools for the job. You pick up an extra severe. That's pretty clear cut why that's so powerful, right? And then it gives you a built-in suit. So then we jump to the back of the card, and you've got.
I will say Dixon is petty as hell, because I had a red Joker come down I think it was second activation turn 1, and I was like, petty. Cool, Dixon, you know what I'm activating next? He's like, well, now I have to activate my Rocketeer and make sure that doesn't happen.
Yeah. No, that's not petty. That's just smart playing.
It was petty.
How in the world? There is no freaking planet in the world where I'm like, yeah, he should get that red Joker scot-free without me doing anything to intervene. That is the stupidest thing.
One of my favorite things to do on defense, the last attack of an opponent's turn, you drop the red Joker so your model survives, and then you activate nurse and you pick it back up. It's just brutal.
That is so aggravating.
I've done it to win initiative too. You cheat in the red Joker or something to win initiative, activate nurse, pick it up, do something.
Yeah.
I'm just like, why did you even do that? That's my take. Why would you even cheat the initiative if you're just going to activate the nurse?
I mean, you can still do effective things, as I'm sure Cackle is going to tell us.
Yeah, so the bottle of painkillers, it's that heal, the text. Target heals 1, 2, 3, and may end at 1 condition on the target. It's the best condition removal in Rezzer, just off the top of my head. I can't think of anything better than that. And then it's got 4 triggers that do a lot. Smashed, only in keyword, of course. You're But say if the nurse heals herself, it's potentially really, really good. Pulled here and there, movement again. These 3-inch moves, if you learn to get them to add up, are incredibly powerful. Preparations, target games focused one. That text right there, single. That's the second reason that you're hiring that nurse. Turn 1, you're focusing up your master with it, or whatever beater you need to give some focus. It's very, very strong there. And then this will numb the pain for shielded is also just it's a good combat thing. Seduction, sometimes a ridiculously powerful attack. I was playing against Nakima a few years ago, one of my earliest recorded videos against Carnage, I think, and I used the seduction attack on Nekima when she had 2 focused, and she went from 2 focused to distracted 1, and it just wrecked the entire game plan. It slowed her down so much from like bleeding my crew that on turn 2 to like just being like completely neutered. So really watch out for opportunities to seduction. And her melee attack is ridiculously strong because it has built-in daze, and just stun is possibly the best control condition in the game.
Yeah, I was gonna say built-in stun seems really good.
Yeah, and the target is pushed up to 3 inches in any direction. One thing I want to note is this is not enemy only, so you can bash your own models turn 1, like say Valedictorian, you're doing 1 damage each time.
Or Archie who can't get stunned.
Yeah, and then you just bottle of painkillers them afterwards anyway, so like you remove the stun, and you healed up some of the damage you did. So again, it's those finding those ways to abuse 3-inch pushes really gets value for a model. And that seduction means she can be useful at a distance. Now the downside of the model, manipulative, not very good defensive tech by itself, especially because like 1 focus severe 6, she's dead.
She's gone.
And then Bottle of Painkillers is only a 3-inch range, and Surgical Instruments is a 0-inch range. So, and Bedside Manner is a really good ability. It can rescue models. It combos well with Carry On Emissary. But again, it's a short range ability. So a lot of her really powerful text is short range. So, but then if she's near the action with those stats, she's going to die. Like compare her to a Gwison. You're paying 7 for the nurse. You're paying 6 for the Gwison. The Gwison's going to take like a severe 5 and a moderate 4 to die. The nurse is going to take 2 mid 3 beats and she's dead, or a single severe 6 and she's dead. So you just want to be a little bit conscious of her only weakness is that she just explodes if she's going to be near there. Yeah. But there's a lot of good text on that card you can leverage for her.
Okay.
Yeah. The biggest issue that I have with her, against her, is literally just the tools from the job. So if she does it like twice, I think that enough is worth her points just as an opponent. Just like, yep, that's another 13 that I have to deal with again.
Yeah, and especially in Keyword with McMorning 1, I often do a double nurse build, and it's just provides that consistency you need. And Seamus, again, that picking up a severe, that consistency of knowing that your master is going to go off. So what you're really looking for nurse to do with a nurse is you want to find those masters that are super strong, but they need their severe to have that consistency, and that's when nurse comes in.
Okay.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah, because you're giving focus and you're getting a strong card, ideally.
Yeah. And both Seamus, McMorning can do severe 7 precise, and Seamus does ignore hard to wound severe 8. So both of those models, like that focus, just completely unlocks the model.
You're saying that I want to point out that it requires double ramp, so like a stone and a card to get that 7 on McMorning. But Seamus is just straight up. He just needs that third. Like, there's an 11, there's another 11. Get wrecked.
And that, once again, plays on the Rezzer theme of, like, if you have cheap models, Rezzers are going to kill them. Like, Rezzers will just absolutely shred anything cheap on the board dies.
Oh, yeah.
So the last 2 that we have for the support and scheming are Gwill and Sloth. Sloth, I think the main thing I've picked up from him is he just makes things go fast.
Yeah, and I think I won't spend much time on the fast and the heal 3 with the slow, because everyone knows how powerful that fast is. It's just stupidly strong. One thing I do want to mention about this combo is you can, of course, heal a model 3 and then make it fast to undo it. Rezzers actually have a couple of undead masters, and so you can heal, say, Molly or Jackdaw 1 for 3 health and then make them fast. Because normally making a master fast doesn't matter. except in this instance, it allows you to negate the slow and heal your master for 3. Very neat combo.
Yep.
The rest of the text I want to touch on because it explains why with Sloth you need to be careful about not leaning too heavily into the fast, because Sloth is incredibly powerful when he's close to enemy models. Consume by Sloth lets you just completely negate a heal and pass it on to a friendly once you get your sin tokens going. That is one of the best anti-heal techs in the game. It's super, super strong. You can also use those sin tokens when people heal to just do 3 damage to them, or sometimes so that's super good. But that melee attack is target suffers 2, 3, 4 damage and gains slow. That's not only one of the best willpower attacks in the faction, that's one of the best willpower attacks in the game. And Sloth is quite tanky, front of card, he's got hard to wound, manipulative is a good combo, he's defense 5, willpower 5, and he can use stones, so it takes a serious commitment to take him down. And if you're slowed with engaged by Sloth, what the fuck are you gonna do? So I just really want to highlight how insanely powerful Bored to Death is, and your game plan for Sloth needs to involve him getting up to the center of the board and being involved in what's going on, because Bored to Death is just incredibly powerful. And a special shout out to if you combo it with Scarlet Temptation in a Seamus crew, good fucking lord, it is just so stupid. And then you're slowed, you're distracted, and you're failing your terrifying duels.
To the listeners that don't have an app or something available, Scarlet Temptation is negatives on duels against willpower. So because it's a willpower attack, you're just gonna get wrecked. It's
you're just taking damage and getting slow.
Yeah. That being said, there's a question from Photon. He says that he's gonna move into Rezzers. He's looking into Reva and Seamus, and it seems like you recommend the Nurse and Seamus one, but is it worth picking up a Nurse for both crews?
Seamus and Reva?
Yes.
Yeah, so a Nurse and Reva.
I think I haven't personally tried it, but I think that argument of Reva does some incredibly powerful stuff as long as she has the cards for it. The Nurse can probably be pretty decent. I usually build my Reva to be doing powerful things whether or not she gets the cards. But it's one of those things where would I take it at top table at a tournament? Maybe not. I would maybe try it. But if you're trying it in a casual game, absolutely you're going to get a lot.
It'll
of
still
power
do
out of
work.
that Nurse. Yeah.
Do
a lot of work.
Just removing conditions alone is fine, because even if it's Reva 2, you can still remove fire that you were not able to remove, because you can only remove a total of 5. So if you have a little left over, you have the Nurse to do that job.
And Focused Breath of Fire is so stupidly good. So put it on your lamp pads and be I'm just blasting your crew apart now. But do note, you do have the Blasphemous Ritual in Reva, because that's something we can talk about later. But the struggle with Blasphemous Ritual is you need a corpse, which can be expensive, but Reva has lots of corpses. So you're looking at your Shield Bearers and Gravediggers for a Reva crew oftentimes to pulse out that focus.
Right.
Okay, and then the other one was Gwill, which this is one of the newer models, and I think Gwill's pretty interesting. I haven't played it out of Keyword, but I know in Keyword with Castor it's really good.
Yeah, so Gwill is one that I've played once or twice myself. I don't get the full power of it, but other people are swearing by Gwill, so I feel like we need to cover it, and I'll briefly just shout all of the text. Whisper in the Ear, you get 2 draw and discard, so again, those crews where you're looking for improving your hand quality, this is probably... This and Nurse are the best models in faction for improving your hand quality. And then Sanguine Evocations, you can stack your deck before a key important model goes, but I think savvy opponents will know to attack you and mess up your deck stacking, so that doesn't necessarily always work.
Yeah.
Decay, very powerful attack when you get to use it, but the thing with these 8-inch range attacks is it requires very precise positioning. Often, if there's a center brawl where you can just stand and shoot, Decay is amazing. If there's flanks matter, then Decay is less amazing. Also, Dispel Magic stat 7 and 1 condition on the target. That's probably one of the best condition removals on enemies in the faction.
Yes.
So it's really worth considering that for enemies.
Yeah, out of Keyword. So I didn't play Gwill, but I can tell you playing Yan Lo in Keyword, I did bring Chiaki against Karis, and just stat 7 ending a condition was amazing. So I know that's a good tech pick for that purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also worth mentioning life and death when resolving if you either attacked a friendly or if you blast onto a friendly with the blast is on min, that would be damaged by this action instead heals 2. So you're not getting that heal on black jokers, of course. But I think the World Series has ruled that you don't even flip on a friendly potentially. I can't remember. But anyway, it's a healing on living models. That's pretty insane ability. Except the problem is like half of Rezzers aren't living, and like I've made some lists where I tried to abuse that heal, and honestly, like you've got Monos and a Loveless in some of your masters, and Carry On Emissary, but that has some issues. So making use of that heal is a little bit tricky. It does also have Essence Transfer, where you can damage one model, say that's good at healing, like say Monos, and you can heal another model. So there's a lot of tools there, and I personally haven't played with it enough to have a strong opinion, but others should. The last thing I want to note, though, is Defense 6, Willpower 6 is insane, and anytime you see Defense 6, Willpower 6 on a model, that's a really solid baseline, and when you throw
And a henchman with Hard to Wound is pretty good too, and Disguised for some reason.
Oh yeah, so like this model is probably surviving till late game every time.
Well, I'm sure when you're looking to attack a model with a charge, you confuse Gwill with just a mossy stump of a tree or something.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
really
why
what I
those
was thinking
Disguise
about.
flavors. Like you look at that, and it could just be a part of the forest.
Yeah, but Will is just annoyingly good just by existing. So yeah, I have to agree. Like, I love this model, and I didn't even know that it was getting used by you guys. So that just makes me even happier.
Yeah. And one thing I'd want to say about Decay is I commented on the limitations of, like, it's an 8-inch attack. You need to be positioned perfectly. But 2 damage, blast, models damaged by this action gain injured 1 is insane. Like, when Decayed goes off, it is insane. Like, it's just... and that's part of the reason it has limitations. Is like,
I feel like a lot of other models that have Decay are stat 5. So this being stat 6 is pretty good with a built-in life and death.
Yeah, and the Infested with Leeches trigger we need to touch on, because that is the single biggest tech use of this model. Until the end phase, the target cannot heal. There's no models damaged by this. There's no duel to do it. There's no caveat. There's no aura. It's just, once this hits, the healing's turned off. It's the most powerful anti-heal effect in the game, I think.
Yeah, so if your opponent bans Manos and they have a lot of demise, models, I would consider bringing Gwill for that effect.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Leviticus is a really good example. The Disguised is going to stop him from beating you to death in melee. And that if you turn off Leviticus's heal, it doesn't matter where he goes. As soon as his health runs out, the demise does not go off. Well, technically, the demise goes off and he dies.
Just you don't heal.
But
I mean, this is enormous against Neverborn, so I can definitely see this as a tech pick just against Neverborn and Explorers, really, because they do a lot of healing, both of them.
And again, like, move 5, range 8 is kind of shitty, but we're talking Rezzers. You can do so much. You can enslave spirit model this, use enslaved spirits to get this model around the board. You could attack it with the int, etc. Only thing to note is Disguised. This model cannot be the target of action generated by the charge action. That includes friendlies. You cannot charge this model and reap it with Dead Rider, and this will come up when you're trying to abuse your friendly moves. You cannot charge this model with a friendly.
It's not that bad. I think that we can all agree that that's still fine.
That's completely fine. Just don't catch yourself out for it. If you plan around it, there's no issues whatsoever. And again, enslaved spirits are where you're usually going to go for moving this.
Oh my god! I just realized you can play this against Bandit, and it serves like 3 functions: anti-heal, anti-charge because of run and gun, and freaking injuring, making it easier for you to hit those guys that are defense 6.
Yeah, and Mad Dog is range 8, and Decay is range 8, so that lines up well. And that's, again, one of the things you want to consider when tech picking is, like, what are the ranges? Because, like, range 12 beats range 10, but if you're both ranged 8, suddenly things are nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of a list of what we might consider, like, things you're going to want to put in the bag if you're looking to tech out, for tournaments or random games. And the other list we have are still models that are good. They have their spots of when you might want to look at them out of keywords. I'm going to go through this full list, and then we'll kind of go through these, probably not quite as in depth, because some of these seem to be having very specific things you want to bring them for. So we'll be able to hit these up a little quicker than the other one. So for lower priority, meaning like corner case, maybe they have very specific situations you want to bring them. For mobility, you have the Students of Viscera, Bone Pile. For tanks, we have the Grave Golem. Utility and tech pieces, we have the Carrion Emissary, Datsuba, Vincent, Madam Sybil, and the Student of Steel. And then support and healers, we have Toshiro, Asura, and a Grave Digger. So looking at some of these models, where do you really like bringing some of this stuff in those corner case situations?
Yeah, as you said, it's a bit of a. We'll go less in depth, so I'll kind of speed run some of these. But Students of Viscera, they're mobile and they're tanky relative to their costs and everything. So basically, Corrupted Leylines, sometimes I would take an out-of-keyword Student of Viscera to run the Lodestone if I couldn't afford a Dead Rider. So it's like a budget option for mobility for something super specific like Lodestones. I haven't taken it out of keyword since. And often if you're planning on playing them out of keyword, just declare Transmortus anyway, is sometimes the plan. Bone Pile, really worth highlighting here, because there's a couple of things on its text. First, it has a numbskull like Archie, so like, again, people declare Rezzers is the only faction with numbskull. It gives us some good anti-condition tech. I'm not sure how many Bone Piles I would hire. They have some condition removal in their bonus that doesn't require card flip, but again, Nurse condition removal is so much better. If we're talking condition removal, I'd probably go Nurse. To me, the reason that these models go in the mobility category is that the thing that they do better than anyone else is teleport around the board. They can take an action to bury the enemy down below, and then next turn they unbury and base contact with a corpse marker anywhere on the board. And if there's no corpse marker, they die, so watch out for that. But they can teleport anywhere on the board with the corpse. And so I like to use this with Riva. It's probably viable with McMorning too. And it just is, it's again, one of the most mobile models in the game when you use it like that. It's a minion, so it can score, catch, and release. It's probably our third best model in the faction for scoring, catch, and release. And it's just, like, just pay attention to the possibilities that open up when you can teleport across the entire table. And that sums up that model. On to the tanks, Grave Golem. This guy, in some matchups, literally unkillable. He also can be surprisingly mobile, because when he does get beaten down and he demises, the Bone Pile, he teleports to corpses. So that's just useful in some crews, especially for fun factor. I find it a super fun model. My very first versatile with Molly, well, not my first, like one of my first versatiles with Molly was Grave Golem and a Grave Digger, and that's a combo you can put into any crew, and it's not competitive, but it's really, really fun using that Grave Golem. And I also want to shout out to the fact that Grave Golem has Hurl Corpse, so you, again, can combo that with Riva. And it has 3/4/6. Severe 6 is relatively rare in the Rezzer faction, and this is one of our severe 6s that we have access to in the faction. And Riva pulses out focus, so and then its big weakness is its mobility, but Riva's shield bearers have knock aside, so Riva is the one home where I found that I just feel like I'm getting incredible value out of my Grave Golem. Maybe not the top tier choice, but I'd say in Riva it definitely feels like A tier, like you're not going to be sad about this model at all, I think.
The utility, I'm kind of curious to see what you think about the Carrion Emissary, because I picked this up, one, because I think it's a sweet emissary model, but two, well, actually, sorry, one, it's a sweet emissary model, and it creates coffin markers, and I have some cool coffin markers. But two, I think it works pretty decent with McMorning, so I was a pretty big fan of it for that reason.
This emissary is so close to just being like very strong, right? And I think where it falls over is that it's a 10 cost model with clunky attacks. Which is, one is that it's got the beak attack 2/4/5 with built-in infect. That's decent. I'm not sure that's 10 stone model good, but it's quite decent. And it's stat 6, but range 0, and range 0 is just so hard to work around.
It's tough.
Kills it. It literally kills that attack.
Like, yeah, you get engaged by a 4-cost model with melee.
Hey, listen, he's a bird. He's got this beak. It's just hard to get in there, man.
Yeah,
bro, like, that's like, I don't get that. Like, this thing is amazing. I love Run and Ren, but then Run and Ren is a range 8 gun attack. So if he's engaged, then he's boned. Like, he can't do it. It's so dumb.
Yeah, and we talked about the weakness of range 8 attacks before. Is like it's just so hard to get that exactly perfect. But then you throw in the gun icon, so then you've got to worry about cover, you've got to worry about friendly fire, you've got to worry
Yep.
about being engaged. If they took the pistol off of this attack, I reckon it would probably be viable. Because we talked about how powerful Decay is if it goes off. Here we've got target suffers 3 blast, 4 blast damage, models damaged by this action gain injured +1. A min 3 gun is potentially very powerful. You know, it's got those built-in zombify, the built-in infect, so sometimes it feels like a min 4 gun. And My Loyal Servant, very powerful trigger. It's so close to being good. And
Yes.
one thing I want to comment on about its attacks is if you combo it with the nurse has bedside manner. So when the emissary gets injured, you rescue it out of combat and you overcome its primary weakness. Okay, so what are the strengths that I want to cover real quick? First off, 666. It's defense 6, willpower 6, movement 6. Incredible stats. It's just really good.
Oh yeah.
Terrifying 12, hard to kill, flight, it has good movement. All of these things are really good. Flesh crawls, friendly undead models with an aura 6 gain +1 move. That really adds up. I've seen this model used in Transmortis coupled with the totem where it stacks. So your valedictorian is move 7 when you're in both those auras,
Pretty
which
good.
is pretty good. So that's adding a lot. And the big things is the bonus to make coffins. It requires an 8, incredibly demanding. That's the big thing that holds back this action. But it lets Seamus teleport to it. It can make a zombie, which Seamus can eat for his double gun attack. Very powerful. It can just say, you don't get to this part of the board because 2 coffins. Very annoying for an opponent to move past
And
with elite
I feel
models.
like Aura of Decay is also pretty big on this card.
Yeah, I'm
It can
definitely
be.
getting to that in a moment. But the last comment about the coffins is remember what we said earlier about you don't really want to hire cheap models into Rezzers because we kill them. The coffins will then AP tax the expensive models, which is really powerful. Now, Aura of Decay. One of the best auras in the game. Holy shit. We talked about the power of anti-heal before. And cannot reduce damage with soul stones? What the hell? I've done things before, like I've put this aura up and then used Reap to pull a soul stone user into the aura, and that soul stone user's just gone. I don't care if it's master, I don't care what it is, that like you just absolutely delete models. And so for me, that's when I really want to bring this model, is if I think, oh, Aura of Decay is actually powerful, I'm going to bring it. And then you just need to combo it with some movement tricks. You've got, your enslaved spirits, your bedside manner nurse, your dead rider reaping stuff into it. You need something to pull it all together. But that Aura of Decay carries the model so hard.
The effigy has that as well. So do you see a world where maybe you just bring the effigy and maybe give it the upgrade instead of paying the full 10?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something worth considering. I've actually tried it in McMorning, and again, if the way you're doing it is you're reaping models into it, that's really good. The only sad part is the answer to the aura is you can kill or displace the model, and killing the effigy is not big deal. And then if you use the upgrade aura, one of the problems is that, the effigy of fate upgrade so that it replaces into a carry-on emissary. One of the problems is like that aura is stronger on turn 2. Often I'm looking for a turn 2 kill with it.
Yeah, that's fair.
But often when list building, I'll be like, man, I wish I could fit one more beater. And that's a time to consider the effigy with fate upgrades, because it's like, I can't afford a 10 stone beater, but what I'll get a 6 stone beater so that maybe mid game one of my beaters has died. Oh, look, I suddenly have another one spare. So I think it probably has some potential. And it has, it can walk and focus the first 2 turns is usually your pattern for that. And so it'll be... And one thing to note about the effigy is it does have Aura of Decay with Accomplice. So you can just double walk, put up Aura of Decay, Accomplice, say, McMorning 1, and be like, oh, look, you can't use armor, hard to kill, shielded, hard to wound, or stones. And models will just explode if you do that. Like, so for the effigy, you're really looking at that Accomplice text is just insane.
You have no hope. Like, that's just like death. I don't know if you ever watched One Punch Man, but that 1-2 combo is basically Saitama's punch. It's just like, boom, you see death.
Yeah. And just a shout out to Molly, which we'll probably cover next time, but the Necrotic Machine has a similar combo with Neurotoxins and Accomplice.
Oh my god, yeah. Because if you're poisoned, you also cannot use Soul Stones. Oh, so gross.
Yeah. So those models I think are definitely worth playing with. And again, in casual games, like I have an avatar Seamus that is a legal proxy for Carry On Emissary, and it's just like, why would
It's the
I not
best.
use these amazing? Like both the sculpts are amazing, and
It
like
literally is the best.
why
It's
would I not
fucking
put that on the table for casual play? It's just
yeah.
really fun model to play.
I've talked about it in the podcast before because, like, I think the emissary with Seamus is almost a necessary thing because of the coffin. So the fact that you mentioned it, I was like, oh my god, I'm so happy I'm not stupid.
Yeah, and I think that's the most common place for it is that it makes a coffin and a corpse, and then Seamus teleports and shoots his gun twice. That's like
Yeah.
the highest top end.
That's the way I've seen it used the most.
Yeah.
It is so freaking good though that it's worth because you can give 2 focus to Seamus before Seamus activates. Like there's
Yeah.
multiple ways in the faction to do this.
Yeah, and the only thing is it does become quite card hungry because you've got the 8, and then Seamus needs to land his 2 attacks and cheat the damage flips, etc. But
Yep.
like the top end of it is so like, oh my god, the enemy crew doesn't exist anymore. Like it's
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like and the risk factor is oh, you missed a bit and you just have to try again next turn. Like
Yeah,
it's still,
that's it.
It's good.
So what about some of these other utility and tech picks? Some of them I'm kind of like I know Vincent, he seems to have a good gun. Datsuba, I don't know what that does. Madame Sybil, pretty decent. I guess
Oh.
Student of Steel is probably just ignore armor would be my
That-
guess.
That's
Student
what
of Steel,
is
you
just
just
a
ignore
no.
armor with it.
There you go.
And even then, it's not that good at it. I've never had a game where I hired Student of Steel out of keyword and then won the game, which is a bad sign. Like, it's just like 8 stones is too much for what it is.
Nice.
Oh man, but like the Datsuba is just Lantern of Souls. It's just a
No.
secondary Lantern of Souls.
Well, there's that, but like Monos is so much better at Lantern of Souls. What
Yeah.
I think I would use Datsuba as a tech pick for is the wrongfully judged enemy only after killing summon an Onryo with slow. Sometimes you have matchups where you know your opponent is hiring a bunch of shitters. Like if you're against Sommer, for instance, you are predicting Bayou Gremlins, and a Bayou Gremlin just becomes an Onryo, and suddenly this model with the shitty 8-inch attack becomes,
Yeah.
I'm converting enemy models into summons, and
Oh my god.
that's the main time that you're looking.
You
at
are
using.
literally the first person to show me how to turn rats into Onryos, and I'm
Yeah.
loving it.
Yeah,
This is
yeah, that's-
insane. How the hell have I never seen this before?
Yeah, and so especially for those like things that have 2 health, like watch out for that. You can easily do 3 or 5 damage as well if you're pouring some focus in. So there'll be some builds for that. Or Molly 1, for instance, hands out focus already. Your enslaved spirits are probably moving this model up the board and stuff like that. But yeah, if you're getting that Onryo trigger and it's a henchman, so it can stone for it, this model is then suddenly worthy of hiring, I think.
Nice.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's one of those ones that most people aren't aware of that text option. Vincent, I have 2 comments about this model. Is first off, exorcism trigger, he kills summons. Main reason to hire him out of keyword, and it's pretty clear cut. But I did also want to mention that his gun, stat 6, range 10, ignores friendly fire, 2, 3, 4 damage, including incorporeal and hard to wound. It's just a pretty insane gun. With rapid fire and access
don't
to
forget
critical
that.
strike, and he can stone. It's just in terms of Rezzer guns, other than our Spirit Barrage, I think this is the best, and sometimes it's better than Spirit Barrage. Like
And
if I'm
he's stat
facing-
6 defense, 7 willpower. Pretty effing good.
Yeah, he's just stupidly tanky as well.
I did not know that this man had rider stats. Why? Well, not rider stats, but he's defense 6, willpower 7.
And he's
Why?
agile, so he just walks out of combat, which is one of the biggest weaknesses of guns. But no, he just says, "Nope, sorry, I want to walk out of combat."
And still gets 2 shots against you.
Yeah, and still gets 2 shots. And if he wants, he can crit strike, stone. And with Molly, where you've got that card draw, you're often just cheating for the critical strike. And Molly hands him focus, Molly 1. There's some matchups, particularly against Nekoma with Mature Neff, where I'm looking at this guy and saying, you know what? I do want a big old crossbow that just rips people apart. Thanks.
That's insane.
Yeah, so he's definitely worth... I mean, the exorcism trigger is the clear cut. You got to hire this guy. But the critical strike trigger, I think you need to not underestimate how scary this guy is when he's doing min 4 beats from cheating and stoning and stuff.
I mean, wow. Like, how come I never see this guy?
I think part of it is just because the times that you have oh, I need a Rezzer gunline are so few and far between.
Yeah.
But when you do need it, like, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah, and you're literally the first person talking about this model I've heard in conversation.
Yeah, out of keyword, I mean, obviously with Riva, he's just really solid because then his attack becomes even scarier. But yeah, I think out of keyword, like, I think that call out to like Nikima and all the flying demons, I mean, that's a good call out for that because, yeah, you need solid range attacks to take care of those matures for sure. When are you thinking about Madame Sybil, though?
Madame Sybil is one that, funnily enough, I don't use much, but like so many people swear by her, I feel like we need a mention of it. And so go over the super solid text on her card. First off, Bump in the Night. Well, yeah, so she's got good tanky stats, so like she's not going to die easily. She's definitely a killable model, but like it's going to take some resources to get past that terrifying 11 hard to wound, 10 health and some stones. Rezzers have a ton of movement tricks, and every time you move a model to be engaged by Madame Sybil, they just get distracted +1. There's no duel, there's no. They just get that.
Yeah.
Scarlet Temptation. We were talking about the potential power of Scarlet's Temptation. Sometimes you've got the Unquiet Dead. Some people like to combo it with Yanlo 2 and his willpower attacks, or Yanlo 1 and his willpower attacks. It's just. If you want a Scarlet Temptation model, this is possibly the best one. I've tried Doxy's, and I think Sybil is better. So that's just really, really good text there. Bleeder Lash, again, that crit strike min 5 can happen, worth being aware of. Other than that, the triggers are pretty decent. Beckoning Call, very strong, but I don't think it's 10 stone model strong. When I have a 6 stone model with Beckoning Call, I'm super, super happy, but when it's on 10 stones, I mean, I do use it. Like, Beckoning Call into charging them with Bleeder Lash can be really powerful. But I think the big reason on the back of the card that people are hiring this model is Undivided Attention bonus. Until the end phase, enemy models within range suffer -1 to their duels during their activation. So -1 to enemy attacks, essentially, and -1 to their terrifying checks, which is a big deal. And Bolster Strength, it's an AoE heal 1. That's a lot of healing. I think that bonus action there is why people are doing it. I struggle a bit with it because I like to play a high-tempo game, and you want to activate Sybil as early in the turn for Undivided Attention as possible. And it needs a 6, which, again, I've mentioned how difficult target numbers are before. So I just feel like the requirements are sometimes a little bit high, but sometimes if you have a matchup where you don't feel that activating first is that huge a cost, maybe you're playing a real... and when that is like, if you're playing a tanky crew... activating first isn't as important. If you're playing a crew where your models can die, that you're doing hit and run tactics like Molly with the Dead Rider Monos Archie sort of models, activating first.
I think
really
that's
matters.
better. I think that's better on like McCabe 2, where he just innately reduces your stats.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I really don't like models where I'm forced to activate. That's like the main reason I hate the Oxfordian Mage in Sandeep. Just like it's like, oh, you have to activate this and get this off, and if you don't, then it really just doesn't seem to benefit the crew a bunch. So models like that kind of piss me off.
Yeah, so I personally don't play her much, but like you could try all sorts of weird things. Like note that Von Stuck 2 has a nice willpower attack, and holy shit, Von Stuck 1's gruesome lecture is on willpower, which is so stupidly strong. Transmortis is a crew that's tanky enough that your activation order, you have a lot more flexibility, because you're like, well, they're not going to kill Valedictorian if I like stall the game a little bit, and that AoE heal is really good. So at a guess, I would try Madame Sybil with Von Stuck. And if you could fit in Madame Sybil and Sloth, I don't know what the build's looking like there now, but like that's potentially a really powerful combo. So like this what I want to kind of put out for this podcast is I want people to understand the tools that are there, and then they can maybe think up their own combos and think what they can do with that. Because I mean, Madame Sybil has so much powerful text with just this limitation.
That'll combo good with some really good models.
Yeah,
I mean, Sloth by himself is fantastic, regardless of, and Madame Sybil may make him better. I don't even you're saying. I know that you said it. I got to put it on the table first, so I trust that it's really good, but I haven't seen it yet.
Oh no, I haven't tried it yet either. It's just a speculation of like this is something that is worth trying for sure.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and then the last three that we have for support and healers is Toshiro, Asura, and Gravedigger. So I'm definitely curious about Toshiro, Asura, and Gravedigger because I have all three of those models and would love to know where they fit in the scheme of things.
Yeah. So Asura, I think she has a lot of weird techs, like she can heal with the decay. She has weird zombie summoning things. But I think the only time that I have seen her do really good work is the fact that she can summon a zombie on the other side of the table, and then it can interact scoring points. And that's something to watch out for in GG4. It's so rare. Last year, I saw one player use Asura successfully, but when he did, it was like, oh wow, that was actually a really good matchup. So it comes up so rarely, but
Yeah.
she can put schemes in really weird spots is essentially what she does. I do want to give a shout out to the fact that she has Decay and Accomplice. You can injure a model and then Accomplice and beat it to death. That's almost good. But she's just a bit too stone hungry for all her triggers. And she's cost 8 to begin with, so it's just pay a bit too much. And she has the desiccation, same like Gwill, her attack can heal instead of damage. But it's not built in again. And then she's an 8-cost Mad Audle with the same attack as the Gwison at stat 5. Stat 5 plus, but same attack as the Gwison. Like, she's just not quite there most of the time. But that teleporting zombies, interesting enough. Toshiro, everybody talks about the summon, but honestly, needing a 12 of crows to me is just, and a corpse, like, that's a lot of resources. To me, corpses are a resource, and I try to be really efficient with them. So I struggle with that. But Foulmouth Motivation, one of the best heals in the game. It's target heals 1, 2, 3 and games focused. I have tried some weird builds where I did that, especially with McMorning 2, where you have excess corpses. You can, if you see a 12 of crows in hand, you can be like, you know what, I'm summoning an Ashigaru turn 1, and then after that, I'm going with spamming Foulmouth Motivation. His attack's okay. The leadership aura is potentially really interesting, particularly with flesh constructs or hanged, but then like the problem is I've just talked about a bunch of individually good text, but finding a crew that abuses every single one of these bits of text really difficult. So
outside of Yan Lo, if I remember correctly, he's still really, really powerful in that crew.
Yeah, he can do some. I know he's never bad. Like he's always, his floor is like has a lot of good tools. And the last thing I want to shout out is the coordinated attack trigger. If you look through the game, coordinated attack is quite rare, and the reason for that is it's stupidly powerful. You attack somebody with Toshiro with say Archie next to them, you're talking a min 5, and his track is a 2-4-5, so often you're spiking to that 4. Like coordinated attack, which he's a henchman, you can stone for it if you want to invest those resources. One of the best offensive triggers in the game.
Cackle, I guess you didn't know. That's a meme on this podcast because I am notorious for doing coordinated attack.
Dixon makes me feel like coordinated attack is on every model.
That's so okay. Well, Dixon, I expect if you're ever playing Rezzers, you got to play some Toshiro and unlock that.
He will just for that one. You know what? Just seeing that one trigger, he's like, "Oh yeah, that's like an auto include for me for everything."
Yeah.
It happens.
I think there's less than 10 coordinated attack models in the game, right?
And
it's a bunch of masters too.
Yeah, it's mostly all masters. Oh well, it's actually 29 models, but it's. Often it's on, like on Gokudo, for instance, but then it's not reliable. But so with Toshiro, I'll sum up by saying everyone thinks it's about the Ashigaru summon, but I don't think that's efficient enough. What I think is really efficient is the coordinated attack and the Foulmouth Motivation are both very, very good. Gravedigger, I hire it if I need corpses and the other corpse options aren't working out. You can hire it for Blasphemous Ritual. You can do double Blasphemous Ritual if you have 2 Grave Spirits Touch in your crews. I find it a bit clunky in a lot of points, and especially because Rezzer's damage tracks aren't usually that spiky. We don't have a lot of those 2-4-5s that you're really looking for when you're talking about focus. We don't have a lot of guns, and where we do, they're a bit awkward. But again, like we do have like Vincent, we have Spirit Barrage, we have Carry On Emissary. So there are some models where pulsing out that focus is relevant. I just often find that it's not the number one on the thing I'm looking for.
It's not like needed.
If you put Killer Instinct on it with McMorning, though, it becomes this amazing resource generator where it's generating a stone and a card
And
every
a card.
turn, which and is doing that while producing corpses. Or
I did that with the guild autopsy, and Dixon was losing his mind.
yeah,
Yes.
um,
Yes.
and
It
I
is
last
so disgustingly powerful.
yeah. And I really want to highlight the front of card as well, because after corpses dropped free movement, we keep talking about movement. Movement wins games. And it can use its bonus action to do that movement. So it can do the interact thing using its bonus action. Field of Corpses. I have had a Gravedigger survive to the end of the game once or twice in the last year, I think. But when I did, at the end of the game, all corpse markers with an Aura 6 are treated as friendly ski markers. I won the game off of that ability. And what happened is at the start of the game, I was like, the Gravedigger is going to get my early game set up. It's going to do some durdling about to score some points mid-game far away from the enemy. And then it's going to end of game score Field of Corpses. And that's just a lot of scoring power. So if you think of it as a scoring piece in addition to a corpse and blasphemous ritual tech, suddenly it has a lot of interesting tools. Even just attack a friendly with accidental rollover. You can charge an accidental rollover on a friendly, and you get 10 inches of movement right there. It's just a weirdly mobile model that can go wherever the fuck it wants.
Yep. And to the listeners, we like to remind them, you're trading damage for these awesome effects. Yes, they're worth it. Please try to hurt your own models.
Particularly like when I'm doing that accidental rollover, it's usually turn 5. I'm like, the model's activated. Who cares if it dies?
Yes.
Or I'm doing on, say, an experimental model where it's like, well, it suffers 1 damage and gains poison. That's going to heal it later. Plus, the shovel effect. But it's often not. Oh, and you don't have to move through your own models as well. So it's just one of those things where sometimes it's a bit of damage. Again, you can do it to Monos, and Monos has regen too. So you're again just thinking, oh well, that you're looking for ways to bypass the cost. And one thing to shout out is undead only target heals with the preparations trigger. Like other factions get so excited about the preparations trigger because it's so ridiculously strong, but because we have Blast Writ, we forget that the preparations trigger exists. And yeah, so it's pretty good. And the Gravedigger is definitely one of the pieces I will most commonly pack, particularly if I'm playing a particular crew that likes corpses.
I want to also point that out because we've said it a lot during today's podcast, but we have to remind newer players, anything that says focus, anything that says extra movement, look into that. Look into that more closely, because that's the reason why we're talking about trading damage and killing our own models for it. Focus is fantastic on a model, and extra movement is always fantastic.
And you'll find some really weird lines where, again, these are both suited, so it will come up like 1 in 100 games. But you might have a situation where you charge a friendly, accidental rollover to do damage to some enemies, because remember, you can charge a friendly and then roll over enemies. And then you heal up the damage on the friendly with Stitch Up and give it focused. Like, what a ridiculously efficient line if that does come up. One thing I also want to call attention to is Dismember is enemy only. I see a lot of people attack their own models to make corpses with Dismember, and I'm like, hold up, that's an enemy only trigger. You cannot do that.
That is
The
illegal.
model would be really good if you could. It would be a fantastic corpse generator if it was allowed, but you can't sit in your deployment zone smacking corpses off your friends.
But Cackle, it says enemy living and then a comma, and it says undead and beast after that. I'm like, yeah, it means enemy for all of these.
Yeah, there's even an FAQ on that. I don't remember the number, but there is an enemy FAQ on that specific issue.
I had that actual argument with somebody too. That's the reason why I'm happy that you mentioned it.
So I don't know about you guys, but looking at kind of this list that we've gone over, I mean, it seems like Rezzers have a lot of options. I don't know if I feel like maybe 10 Thunders has as many out of keyword and versatile options, but
more.
This is
I think,
more. This is pretty close to it though, as far as factions go.
Yeah, and I think we didn't cover a few random ones like Night Terror's Concealment, but one of the reasons I play Rezzers is they're extremely high on the teching. I really like playing the list building game of making the optimal list for the matchup, and Rezzers are just really good and really fun for that.
I like to call it comboing in Rezzers because it's outside keyword synergies rather than in 10 Thunders. I've noticed that it's more screw your opponent. Most of the text in 10 Thunders is more to stop some shenanigans on the opponent And in Rezzers, it's more like, no, I'm just going to make my shenanigans even better.
That's a really important point. You want to be looking, when you're doing all these tech picks, at least in Rezzers, yes, you're looking for individually strong models like the Archie Dead Rider Monos thing, but you're also looking for those cross keyword synergies. We talked about Madame Sybil and Sloth. We talked a bit about how corpse crews like Riva and McMorning are better with Bet Noir. So you're looking for those things where it's like, wow, this actually has more synergy than even in its own individual crew. Hanged and Molly 2 are a good example where she can overcome their weakness by moving them around the board. So looking for a lot of those things where you cover the weaknesses and or build on the strengths can be really powerful.
Yeah, because like the That's So About thing, I didn't even think about, but that's such a Rezzer thing that I'm just like, yep, no, that makes perfect sense. Rats just feeding into a crew once again.
If I see Hamlin or Parker, I'm going to be like, that's a good little tech piece for all these stupid rats that are coming my way.
That's what, yeah.
So I really enjoyed talking about this, Cackle. I mean, so does it really depend, or do you find yourself going out of keyword for 2 or 3 models like in a list, or are there some lists where it's like, I pretty much only have the master and totem and everything else is out of keyword?
Yeah, it really depends on his master base. Like with Molly, my core is usually Archie Kruligan, and the rest can be from out of the keyword, because her keyword has some strong models, but they don't really jive together, and they all compete because they all want to discard cards, which is like anti-synergy because your hand runs out.
Against me, you played the Dead Rider, Manos, Archie, a Kruligan, and I forgot the other model, but you have one more beater.
Yeah,
I was just like,
that's a flex
spot
for that last spot.
Yeah, I was like, is this a Molly crew? What the hell is happening here? And I got violently destroyed because of that last. I did not know about the Kruligan at that time. The Kruligan double activation, and I just got violently destroyed.
Yeah, and we'll be talking a lot about the Molly and the Kruligans in the next one. Dr. McMorning, my default with him nowadays is I build a lot into the keyword just because I think it has a lot of really powerful stuff. The Rogue Necromancy is super strong, and the Flesh Constructs have some really cool combos, and so we'll cover that more there. But with McMorning, he's so flexible that if I see a matchup where I'm like, oh, like Pandora is a good example, like, oh, I'm screwed here, I can pivot to be almost entirely away from the keyword and still be getting those card draw synergies from the marker removal, still be getting like the plastic surgery combos going. So that varies a lot. I've just started recently experimenting with some out of keyword Von Stuck stuff, because like the history with Von Stuck is that he's been so ridiculously strong in keyword, no one's bothered to experiment. But like, how come I've never heard anyone mention Scarlet Temptation and Gruesome Lecture before? Like, that seems like a combo.
Dude, you made me want to try out freaking Girly with the Bleeder Lash in his crew specifically because of that. Because I'm like, I know that she's good because I played her. Like, this gotta be disgusting. So I want to try it out now.
And you throw Beckoning Call in with Von Stuck, and he's already a positioning master, and throwing in some abilities to move stuff around also seems good.
Oh my god.
And so, and Jackdaw's another example of I've almost always played him in keyword because the keyword is so strong. But Jackdaw also has some huge weaknesses of like, oh, what if they happen to declare the one master that's good at Ruthless? So you got to start thinking outside the box and thinking, oh, what are the pivot options? What can I change? And I think every time I've done that with the master, like so far, I think Molly, McMorning, and Reaver are the ones I've done it with most. I've ended up discovering that there's just a huge amount of like cross crew synergies in Rezzers, because Rezzers have a bunch of sub themes of like willpower stuff. They have a corpse sub theme, and stuff like that, or they have movement shenanigan sub themes. So there's just a whole bunch of stuff that like weirdly interacts across multiple keywords.
A clarification on one of the combos, so you can mention it, because like I know that we talked about it in passing, but Von Stuck to obeying Betty to hit one of your own models, like say a student of Viscera, so that she buries herself, and then figuring out a way to drop a corpse on the other side of the table, or if you're playing against somebody that uses corpses.
Yeah. That's
right?
something
that works out, right?
Yeah, totally. And one of the things I wanted to mention about the Gravedigger, and one of the reasons, you can hire Enslaved Spirit as a budget Gravedigger in some matchups, and it's incorporeal, which helps. But the cool thing about Gravedigger is that if you need it to drop corpses in a remote location, if it runs over there and somebody kills it, you still get a corpse out of it. So, like, the fact that it drops a corpse on death is relevant. And there will be some stuff in the game that I will like, whether or not it drops a corpse on death is relevant to whether or not I want to hire it in Rezzers.
Yeah, it's
That's
so funny
pretty cool.
because I feel like if you don't play against Rezzers a lot of times people, and you guys might come across this, where they're like, oh, that model died. It drops a corpse, but we don't need it, so I'm not going to drop a corpse. Rezzers, I can think of very few games where corpses don't matter.
Yeah, like it's got to come up a lot, and so it's just good to be in the habit of following the rules. Because from memory, dropping a corpse isn't optional, so you should always do it. Same thing with stacking your discard pile in the correct order is important, because some crews
Yes.
like Molly's will.
Don't shame me, Dixon.
Hey man, no, you've been a lot better lately, but like Cackle, that was a fight for like a year or something.
I was like, it doesn't matter. Just no.
It's like Peter matters. Like it really, and then I started playing crews that actually cared about the card that was on top. And since he always had a severe or something, he started changing. It's like I'm just gonna keep doing this.
Honestly, tools for the job probably fixed me when it comes to that, because it does matter what's on top with tools for the job.
Yeah.
Well, Cackle, I'm going to give you a minute here. Is there anything else generally about Rezzers and that you want to share? And then also, is there anything you want to plug?
I think probably the biggest thing, Rezzers and tech building in general, is to not get stuck in your ways and not to just listen to my ideas, but to really listen to what some of the tools are, and then to think of your own solutions for how you can combine those
And
tools.
play style as well, because my play style is not the same as yours.
Yeah, exactly. Because all of the most powerful stuff I've heard about in terms of these OOKs and versatiles is people looking at things in a creative way and doing things in a way that no one else has thought of. So, like, this time we just thought of the Stuck and Sybil combo, and I think if you just sit around brainstorming, and I'll admit, when I was playing Rezzers, I was getting stuck into a rut hiring the same models all the time, and it's been super useful for me to sit down and actually go through the list and review the strengths of a lot of the models. And I'm sure we even forgot some, so I would love to hear if folks think of any others.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the Discord, or even in response to some of the videos we're putting out, if you have models that you're like, hey, yeah, I've done this combo and it's worked out really well, that's kind of how we figure out some of these cool things in the new Gaining Grounds.
Yep. Just everybody that's a listener in our Discord episode discussion, we're definitely going to be talking about that.
Yeah. Anything you want to plug, Cackle?
Just that I might be returning to the show, so tune into the future ones.
Yeah, I mean, the next two shows we are going to focus on, we'll do Molly first because I'm really enjoying her. And I want to get a couple more games with McMorning before we talk about him. And we'll talk about those two keywords coming up next. And it's about due, because I'm trying to think, even the last time we did a Rezzer Master deep dive, it might have been Yan Lo. So it's been a while.
I think the last time Chris was still here.
Yeah, I think Chris was still on the podcast, which he's actually wanting to get more games in. So he's actually coming back because he thinks this Gaining Grounds is more interesting. The last Gaining Grounds, he hated it. He thought it was so boring.
Because after like 15 games that I play against him, we realized then, you just have to murder everybody.
Yeah, you're just fighting. Just scrapping.
Yeah, it's just like fighting the zone.
All right, well, I think we're going to leave it there. Thanks for coming on, Cackle. It was a lot of fun talking with all this Rezzer stuff. And until next time, make sure that you guys are flipping cards, flipping tables, and we will see you all later.